Tonight,
we believe that the ballots were counted accurately with the machine count.
Americans have Georgia on the mind as a manual recount begins.
We are already beginning the transition. We're well underway.
Meanwhile, former Vice President Joe Biden already filling key posts in his upcoming administration, and the Pentagon shakedown that's alarming staffers.
We are unique among militaries. We do not take an oath to a king or queen, a tyrant or a dictator. We do not take an oath to an individual.
Plus,
you are an army!
Shattering barriers and making history. One man's inspiring journey to become the first Down syndrome athlete to complete an Ironman triathlon. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. A week after the elections and the legal war continues. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup. Well, with the election results yet to be officially certified, Joe Biden continues to build his transition team, while lawyers for President Trump filed more legal challenges over possible voter fraud. CBN's Dale Hurd kicks us off with tonight's top story.
President Trump and Joe Biden continue to exist in two very different realities, with both assuming they won the presidential election. Biden is moving forward with his transition team and has announced his longtime advisor Ron Klain would be his new White House chief of staff. Possible Biden cabinet appointees include a lot of names from the Obama era, and Senator Bernie Sanders has said he'd accept the position of Secretary of Labor if offered. Meanwhile, the Trump legal team has filed at least 15 challenges in Pennsylvania alone in an effort to capture the state's 20 electoral votes. There have also been legal challenges in Arizona, Nevada, and Michigan, and a hand recount has been announced for Georgia. In Michigan, a Trump lawsuit cites multiple witness accounts of irregularities, incompetence, and illegal vote counting, including counting batches of the same ballots multiple times.
There are real questions here. The recount is a great next step in Georgia, as are these lawsuits. We just want answers, and the American people deserve to be able to ask questions.
Trump legal team member Jordan Sekulow.
I would just tell everybody watching right now, it took 37 days from the 2000 election until we got the order, the ruling from the Supreme Court that put George W. Bush ahead in the electoral count and made him president of the United States. We're only about 8 days into this.
And it should be noted that in 2014, when the website Vox retweeted a poll showing most Americans think elections are rigged, new Biden Chief of Staff Ron Klain replied, "That's because they are." But Americans are going to have to wait to see the court verdicts on this election. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
All right, thanks, Dale. Lawmakers are back in Washington for what's historically considered their lame duck session. This time around, though, due to extraordinary uncertainty, they confront major challenges. Senior Washington correspondent Tara Mergener has more on what's ahead.
Turning Republicans and Democrats face major hurdles, including election fallout, a possible government shutdown, and the need for stimulus as coronavirus spikes across the country.
Come to order.
Both parties agree economic relief is a top priority.
We need to think about, if we're going to come up with a bipartisan package here, about what size is appropriate.
But even after months of debating, cannot agree on an amount.
And the HEROES Act should be the starting point, not an emaciated bill that prioritizes protections for corporations and considers the needs of American families as an afterthought.
The GOP wants a targeted package of around $500 billion. Democrats are pushing for broader relief closer to $2 trillion. Both parties support help for healthcare systems, schools, and small businesses, plus a new round of $1,200 checks for individuals. Unless Congress approves another spending bill, the government could shut down December 11th. Leader McConnell and Speaker Pelosi reportedly agree on the goal of a new package of spending bills rather than another funding extension. If talks fail, however, a continuing resolution could keep things running.
Renewing the federal judiciary has been a major success over the last 4 years.
One item happening on the Hill is the confirmation of new judges. McConnell plans to continue right up to the end of the 116th Congress.
President Trump has appointed 222 federal judges, which is more than any of his 5 predecessors. But the significance of that number comes from the fact that Trump's nominees have faced more unrelenting and systematic opposition from the other party than any president in history.
Another unresolved issue for the lame duck session, no defense authorization bill.
It has been suggested that we should rename as many as 10 of our legendary military bases.
The president says he will veto any legislation, including name changes of military installations named after Confederate generals. As for a COVID relief bill, the outlook for legislation is also clouded by the presidential election. President Trump was the chief GOP force pushing for the legislation this fall. On Capitol Hill, I'm Tara Mergener, CBN News.
All right, thanks, Tara. Joining us now, David Brody, CBN Chief Political Analyst. David, let's pick up right where Tara just left off. How much does the uncertainty clouding the election throw a wrench into the work of Congress, from the Defense Authorization Act to another coronavirus relief package?
Well, there's uncertainty everywhere, John. First of all, as we know, there's uncertainty about the election, and therefore there's uncertainty about exactly what Donald Trump will do in a lame duck session because of that. So let's be honest, we just don't know exactly how all of this is going to go. Now, typically, there are not big legislative achievements in a lame duck session, so you've got that as a baseline. And as it relates to the stimulus bill, the sense is that most likely that'll get punted into January. When I say January, the actual Biden administration taking over, if that is indeed the case. Boy, John, I got to tell you, we're 2 weeks past the election. I'm still doing disclaimers if that's the case, but that's kind of where we're at.
David, the hand recount, as you were just suggesting, begins in Georgia as Trump's legal team files legal challenges or lawsuits like in states like Michigan. Are we any closer to seeing a final election verdict?
Not yet, John. Look, this is going to take some time. There's going to be that hand recount in Georgia. After that, there'll be a machine recount. You've got other recounts going on in other states. That'll eventually take place. And so I think the date to think about, John, in all of this is December 8th. That is when many of the results need to be certified so the electors can be chosen on December 14th. So December 8th is the day. I think the strategy here at this point is to see what happens from a Trump campaign standpoint. And if it goes beyond December 8th and certain states haven't certified their results, then you're opening it up to this thing we've talked about before, which is dual electors. Would state legislatures actually choose their own electors? In other words, would Republican state legislatures in a Pennsylvania, for example, in a Georgia, for example, in Arizona, for example, choose Trump electors? That is a possibility here, and where this could be heading if things aren't resolved by December 8th.
I did read about that and also read that some of the governors might actually be in imposition to state Republican legislatures if they do move that direction. David, meanwhile, the Biden campaign is moving full steam ahead, planning for January. Interestingly, today, key conservative Republicans, Senators James Lankford and Chuck Grassley, said they'll intervene and help Biden receive daily intelligence briefings that are normally afforded incoming presidents. David, does that signal a break with President Trump?
Well, it's a soft break. Lindsey Graham has also said that Joe Biden should get some intelligence briefings as we move forward. And Lindsey Graham, as you know, has been a staunch supporter of the president. So I'm not going to call, I know I just said a soft break. I don't even want to use the word break, but there's a softening. Why don't we just leave it at that? A softening of some Republicans as this drags on. And I say drags on because, let's be honest, the drum beat is beating, and it's not a good drum beat for Donald Trump. You've got the Democrats, you got the media, you got liberals, you got Washington establishment folks all saying, come on, Mr. President, it's time to concede and give it up. We know he's not going to do that, but as the drum beat gets louder, the softening gets harder.
That is definitely true. David Brody, thank you so much for your insights.
You bet.
Well, also tonight, we're examining the major national security risks stemming from the shakeup at the Pentagon and a transition of power stuck in limbo. CBN national security correspondent Eric Phillips joins me now. Eric, I know you spoke with one military expert who told you this is troubling both domestically and internationally.
Well, John, that's right. I spoke to Brad Bowman with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. He says he's extremely troubled because while the U.S. is certainly resilient and the military ever ready, the timing of all of this couldn't be worse. President Trump dropped the bombshell via Twitter Monday that he'd fired former Defense Secretary Mark Esper, saying, quote, "Mark Esper has been terminated. I would like to thank him for his service." In the same tweet, the president announced Esper's replacement, Christopher Miller. Brad Bowman is a military strategy expert.
I think the manner and the timing of the firing are unfortunate.
What followed was the resignation of acting Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, James Anderson.
So you have the Secretary of Defense being fired, basically Monday, and then you have what is widely viewed as kind of the number 3 position, the acting Undersecretary for Policy, who's turned in his resignation as well.
But it didn't stop there. Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, Joseph Kernan, also resigned, citing plans to retire for months.
One senses that President Trump wants people right now in key positions that are maybe more focused on loyalty than other things, and that may or may not be what we need right now. I think it's troubling as well, both for domestic reasons and for international reasons. I say domestically because we're in a period of transition in this country right now. No doubt we have enemies and adversaries that would like to test us. We're constantly being tested in the cyber domain and elsewhere. And the only thing that keeps some of our adversaries and enemies at bay is the threat of an overwhelming response.
Though Bowman says the shakeup doesn't impact our military readiness, it could give our enemies the impression of chaos or weakness and therefore embolden them to take action. He says equally troubling is the disputed election results and any delayed transition of power.
Because of these legal challenges and this kind of unusual, if we're being gracious, transition that we're seeing right now, it's delaying that transition, it's delaying those briefings, it's delaying those classified briefings, those classified materials being relayed to the new team. And that, it's difficult to measure, but I think we can say on fairly safe ground that there's a negative national security consequence of that as a result. I focus for a living on, threats to our country and what the Department of Defense should do about it. And I'm telling you, the threats are so comprehensive, so grave, and in so many cases increasing and difficult and onerous that we really can't spare an extra day in making sure that we're ready to respond.
Bowman adds the threats will neither wait for Pentagon leadership to settle down nor for our government processes to take place.
Given the threats we confront from China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, terrorism, we don't need a learning curve, on January 20th.
I should mention Esper's chief of staff adds to the list of those who have departed from the Pentagon. Also, an interesting hire by the new acting Secretary of Defense, Christopher Miller. He has tapped Trump loyalist Douglas McGregor to be a senior Pentagon advisor. The White House signaling that the new leadership could help to achieve the president's national security priorities, including withdrawing troops from the Middle East. Soon. Soon meaning a matter of perhaps weeks. John.
All right, CBN's Eric Phillips. Thank you, Eric. Well, as COVID-19 cases surge across the country, the economy is continuing its slow recovery. Last week's Labor Department report showed 638,000 jobs were added in October, with a falling unemployment rate from 7.9% in September to 6.9% last month. The report shows some of the job gains were seen in industries hit hard by the pandemic, including retail, leisure, and hospitality. However, 11 million Americans remain unemployed and roughly 21 million are still collecting some form of jobless aid. Well, with me now is Mark Hamrick, Washington Bureau Chief and Senior Economic Analyst at Bankrate. Mark, it's always a pleasure to have you. The number of people looking for unemployment benefits keeps dropping, but it's still high by historical standards, as you well know. Mark, in your opinion, is the economy on the right track?
Well, it's recovering, and I think that's a positive sign. But we go back to what the genesis of this downturn was and is, and that is the pandemic. And when we see these shocking numbers all across the country now, that's a downside risk for the economy, as Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell acknowledged just today.
Mark, the coronavirus is surging again, and there's talk of another wave of lockdowns in some places. How would that affect the economic recovery?
Anything that further hinders economic activity, basically consumer expenditures, then has a negative impact on the economy more broadly, including the ability of employers to either keep their workers on staff or to bring them back. And so I do worry about that. We have seen some pretty consistent improvement in the jobs numbers, as you outlined in the lead-in here. The latest weekly jobless claims numbers continue to work in the right direction. But, that has been within the context of a pandemic that had been, broadly not spiking as we've seen very recently. And so I do worry about the outlook here during these colder months of autumn and winter.
Mark, stocks shot up this week on the positive news of a vaccine. Is that one reason why stocks are near record levels despite the ongoing pandemic concerns and a possible surge as we head into winter?
I think investors are always looking ahead, looking down the road. And obviously, all of us, one way or the other, are looking forward to the time when the economy can proceed in a more normal fashion and consumers and businesses can operate in a way that we're familiar with before March. And so the positive news, very positive news, that the Pfizer vaccine appears to be 90% effective is probably the first of many comparable announcements. And it reminds us of remarkable ingenuity and how really impressive the scientific community is and has rallied together to get us toward this solution. But whether stock prices are sustainable at these levels can be answered only with the passage of time. But I do think that that's been one theme throughout this downturn, and that is people are looking down the road, looking forward to better times ahead, as we all are.
I certainly agree with you there. Mark Hamrick with Bankrate.com, thank you so much for being with us and for your economic analysis.
Thank you.
Coming up, how hospitals are handling an increase of positive COVID-19 cases and what a surge in the virus could mean for the upcoming holiday season.
Introducing the CBN Bible from CBN.com. Now, an easier way to study the Bible and grow in your faith. Highlight your favorite verse. Read separate versions at a glance. Click and read a commentary. Or cross-reference your favorite verse using the Strong's Concordance. All the right tools to study the Bible, all in one place. The CBN Bible, available at cbn.com/Bible or the iTunes App Store.
This is CBN News Watch.
Thanks for joining us.
Watch breaking news, exclusive stories and programs, credible news reporting.
We show you what's happening in the world and how you can pray about it.
This is CBN News Watch, because truth matters. Weekdays at 5 on the CBN News Channel.
Woohoo! Hi, Superbook fans. Here's something else you'll love. Whoa! It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
No Super Falls man. Come.
Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes, too. And so much more! Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon! It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
Welcome back. COVID-19 hospitalizations and deaths are accelerating at a faster rate heading into the holiday season. All 50 states have seen a rise in infection rates, forcing state leaders to implement new restrictions. America notched more than 1 million new confirmed cases in the first 10 days of this month, and more than 150,000 in a 24-hour period. Among them, Trump campaign advisor Corey Lewandowski, who confirmed he tested positive for the virus, citing he believes he was infected in Philadelphia, but says he is not experiencing any symptoms. And joining us now is Dr. Craig DeLisi with the Titus Regional Medical Center in Mount Pleasant, Texas. Dr. DeLisi, thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Doctor, you're in Texas, which is one of the hardest hit areas in the country, the first state to pass the 1 million mark in cases. How is the healthcare system handling there in the Lone Star State with the increased cases and hospitalizations? And do you think it can manage what's coming down the pike?
I hope we can manage what's coming. I think currently we're handling things well. Obviously, they do vary from place to place within the state. It's a big state, and certain places are being hit harder than others. Down at the border in El Paso, I know they're struggling and seeing volumes that are probably exceeding or close to exceeding their capacity. Up here, even though we're seeing increases in cases and hospitalizations, we've not been close to our capacity. And the state has a pretty good system of tracking those things. It's divided into several different regions, and those numbers are emailed daily to people in the hospitals, the administrators, and I don't think we're anywhere near capacity, but I think our hope for all of us is that we'll be able to withstand whatever's coming.
How are you and your medical team, the staff and the nurses, how are you all faring with the uptick in cases?
It keeps us busy. It's more or less consumed our lives for the last 6 months. There's been some seasons when we've seen less and seasons when we've seen more. We thankfully had a nice little lull there at the end of August into September, but things have steadily picked up again, and so it's busy. It's hard to meet the needs even from the standpoint of testing and seeing patients in the outpatient setting. It seems as if we can't have enough appointments available for that, so we've had to be creative. The state's done some testing locally for us, but so far we're hanging in there.
You might be the perfect person to ask this. We're just 2 weeks away from Thanksgiving. What would you recommend for families? Should they be getting together for the holiday?
Yeah, so I guess probably the party line public health official answer would be to encourage people to not do that or to minimize that to a degree, and I understand that, and I think there's wisdom there. My perspective, and really from the beginning of this, is that while the virus is here and we have to deal with it, we also can't stop living in the process, and I think we have to figure out the things that we normally do and figure out how to do them in a way that's healthy and reasonable. We want to err on the side of caution, of course. And so as it relates to Thanksgiving, I think that, smaller crowds are better than bigger crowds. If you're in places where weather's nice and you can eat outside, that's better, obviously. But I also think in other cases where those things may not happen, one of the things that might be appropriate for family that's gathering with, say, other family that they haven't seen or don't live near is to really have a couple weeks of increased caution that precedes that trip. For my own family, I have a lot of children, and we are going to get together with my parents who live in Florida. And when we know that trip is coming, and because of that, right, my kids, myself, we're just doing a lot less of extra type of things to kind of minimize exposure.
Well, Dr. Craig DeLisi, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your expertise and all the work that you're doing there in the state of Texas.
Okay, thank you so much.
Up next, unrest continues overseas. Why protesters are taking to the streets in Armenia following a recent peace deal.
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.
Well, some sad news to report here. 8 military members, including 6 Americans, were killed in a helicopter crash in Egypt. A U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter went down off the southern coast of Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. Officials say the chopper crashed because of technical issues. 1 American survived and is receiving treatment at an Israeli hospital. Well, looking overseas to this week's peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan, while the agreement halts the suffering of tens of thousands of civilians caught in the middle of war, as CBN correspondent Chuck Holton reports, many Armenians believe it puts something greater at risk, their history as a Christian nation.
Unrest still grips Armenia after a peace deal accepted by its president that he described as painful. Since September, the citizens here have been under attack from their neighbors, Azerbaijan and Turkey, over the region of Nagorno-Karabakh. Many in that region fled to the capital, Yerevan, and are now protesting what they see as surrendering their future. For months, the entire country supported the war effort, even as the Azeri military continued to pound civilian areas.
This has become an existential issue. This is an issue of ethnic cleansing
and terror-inspiring means applied by Azerbaijan towards Armenians who live there.
It was started by the Azeris, who are trying to not only take territory that has been historically Armenian for thousands of years, but they don't want to stop with just the taking of territory. They want to wipe out the Armenian people.
The Armenian military is vastly outnumbered, some say as much as 8-1. After the Azeri military claimed to have taken the region's second largest city, Shushi, the situation turned dire.
Erdogan, who's president of Turkey, seeks a revived Ottoman Empire with Islam at its head. And right now, Armenia and the Republic of Artsakh are standing in the way of that vision.
Not only does this current truce stop the bloodshed for the moment, it also forces Armenia to give up land it has occupied for centuries. After news of the peace deal, angry protesters took over a government building, calling for the president to resign.
Tens of thousands of people have been displaced in this conflict, and many of them have taken up shelter here in Yerevan with their family, with friends, or some people are just taking in refugees out of the goodness of their own hearts.
Now, many of these refugees face an uncertain future as their homes have been seriously damaged or destroyed. Russian peacekeepers patrol the ground in the Nagorno-Karabakh, but the people of Armenia say this crisis is far from over, and they fear their rich religious history will soon be wiped out in the areas they no longer control.
Their very existence is endangered right now. And as Americans, as Christians in America, we have that obligation to support Armenia and Artsakh.
From Yerevan, Armenia, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Thanks, Chuck. Coming up, after covering more than 140 miles on land and underwater, one remarkable athlete proves nothing is impossible with God. Next.
Come home to the sounds of Southern Gospel from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites like the Gaithers, the Crab Family, and bluegrass sounds like Mountain Faith. So make yourself at home with the all-new CBN Southern Gospel, now available at cbnradio.com.
And finally tonight, the finish line is just the start for a 21-year-old athlete from Florida, who's now among the latest to add his name to the Guinness Book of World Records. Chris Nikich became the first person with Down syndrome to complete an Ironman triathlon.
You are an Ironman! You did it, Chris, with his hammer Dan Grieve. Amazing!
Nikich swam 2.5 miles, biked over 100 miles, and ran a full marathon's 26.2-mile course, and managed to finish under the 14-minute time limit. Nikich credited God for his success, saying he was surrounded by angels. He is already setting new goals for the next year. And congratulations to Chris, and just a remarkable feat. Well, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation. Thank you so much for watching. We hope to see you right back here tomorrow. Good night.